successors, but not entirely and not always. The interesting history of Methodism is that it began in the Bahamas as an integrated church. Joseph Paul and his followers, they were mostly black, but they had a couple of white members from the very beginning. And when the Bethlehem Chapel was operating, it was about almost half and half. Statistics are a little vague, but by the time the West Chapel was built and the missionary from England came, was when things started to change. We don't quite know what happened, what the dynamic was, but of course, as a colony of Britain, there were things happening socially. That was the period when there seemed to be some move towards segregation, and then a lot of the whites moved out to the Eastern Chapel, which became Ebenezer. And most of the blacks gathered over in the South, which became Wesley. And then you were left with this group that were mostly the wealthier Bay Street merchants and a few others who eventually formed Trinity. So Trinity started where it presently is with a number of the original Methodists already out of that congregation. So the congregations had started by that point to move in different directions. And it was after that that segregation really came in. That when Ebenezer was built in the early days, the first chapel was open. By the time that had been destroyed and they rebuilt a new one, they had a partition in the middle of the pews that went up 6 feet high. The blacks came in one day, and Ebenezer. The blacks came in one door, the whites came in another. You could hear each other sing and pray, but you couldn't see each other. The same style was used in Governor's Harbor, in Cupid's Key, in Rock Sound, in Harbor Island. They later cut that partition down to the pew level. So now, but that little divide is still there.
You know,
now Trinity, I was told, where that wasn't officially in place, there was still the practice that blacks came in one door, the western end, and the whites came in the eastern end.
Trinity was considered a white church.
Yeah. Even in my days, my childhood, when I came in from Eleuthera to go to high school in the late 60s, Trinity was still had that reputation of being the rich white church. But it has considerably changed since then.
Well, I was going to ask you.
I remember inviting you to come and see.
Yes.
When I first moved to Trinity.
You must come.
Yes,
you did come.
I did come.
You commented.
You did?
Yes.
The complexion
you did?
changed.
Yes. When he became,
have you been there recently?
When he became pastor, he invited me to come along, and I did show up.
Are you coming to the church service?
I think so. On 2 occasions. But I didn't see too many of the members of the church or the names of people who I thought would be there. So they are the people who moved to Trinity, to Ebenezer, eh?
Well, some moved out back then. There were also some political disagreements, and so some people moved up the hill to the Kirk.
Yes.
And some moved other places. You know, the social dynamics were happening.
Like Baptists who multiply by dividing?
Yeah, the Methodists have historically been that way.
Reverend Higgs, the split also came when we split from the MC, right?
Yeah, the Bahamas Conference pulled out of the Caribbean to form an autonomous conference. Trinity was part of that movement.
And so
there have been a number of events or occasions, circumstances. But I think overriding has been the general social change within the country over the last 40 years.
Yes.
And that is very obviously reflected in the makeup of Trinity.
And that social change impacted the membership of the church because you lost a lot of members, didn't you?
Yeah, lost some and gained some as a result. But, the whole move to independence, the majority rule, a lot of things that happened meant that certain people felt a little more alienated or pushed to the side, whereas others felt they were now more welcome and could come in. And then you have other dynamics that were happening, like with the choir at Trinity. There was a time when that was exclusively white.
Yes.
Like, probably not as bad, but in Harbor Island in the days of when the church was in bloom and full force, they had a policeman stationed at the bottom of the staircase. So an old black person would try to go up to get in the choir.
Is that right?
Every Sunday morning. So, you know, but we've come a long way from those days.
We've come a long way.
But at Trinity, there were a lot of dynamics happening. And being in the heart of downtown, so involved, plugged into the political and national leadership, as well as with the Methodist movement. Queens College started there in 1890, started as a segregated school, mainly, and the minutes and the records record, it was designed to be a superior school for the children of the missionaries and the colonial masters.
An elitist school.
An elitist school. With the advent of some of the changes that were happening in the country in the 50s, that whole big thing began to ferment and the change happened under the leadership of Reverend R.P. Dyer, followed by Reverend Litherland when they moved to Village Road, followed by Reverend Neville Stewart, who I can remember because I was there in his day.
Right.
So that whole movement, and Queens College was integrated back in the, well, incrementally in stages, because there were people like Bishop Michael Eldon and his sister Kiva who went there, who considered themselves black, but they were bright enough to be white enough to get into school. There were some families who one child went to QC because they were light enough, another went to the public school because they were a little darker.
Yes.
But that's the times they lived in then.
Yes.
But Queens College progressed and then became a totally integrated school. So as all of these things were happening in the national level, Trinity did not get left behind. Also, the socioeconomics meant that as more and more of the rich white merchants from Bay Street were growing older or moving out of that area, other people came in, the economy was broadened across the population. Then it meant that this perception changed. Well, the perception didn't change right away, the reality changed, that Trinity was no longer made up of a membership of strictly rich people.
But that is pretty much a perception today.
But the perception still continues. This is why I corrected myself. The perception may not have changed totally.
Right.
But the reality is quite different. We have across the spectrum of the social conditions, economic, otherwise. You know, you come into Trinity on Sunday morning and you will see a representation of the Bahamas.
Let's take a break here on the program, and we're going to continue to talk about it. And we really appreciate this history lesson, Reverend Higgs, on Methodism in the Bahamas and Trinity Methodist Church. When we return, we'll talk some more about the 150th anniversary celebrations of Trinity. We'll come right back.